The CD, the compact disc, the most popular format in music from the mid-1980s to the early 2000s. And now, the final format to be purged from my belongings. I'm Larry Fedoruk, and this is Later That Same Life. On each episode of my weekly podcast, a different topic, discussion, or story from our lives.
Season 18, Chapter 13.
My CDs must go. I love the compact disc, even though I was raised on vinyl, and even though the compact disc was partly used as a ruse for me to pay again for all of my favorite vinyl albums. A lot of times they didn't even make new music, they just converted the old stuff to a digital format and sold it to me again. My vinyl was the first thing to go. Years later, the cassettes, a while ago the DVDs, followed by most of my books, and now, finally, the CDs. The CDs, the last physical evidence that I was a music fan. Wow, look at all those CDs, you must really like music. Same way people would look at all my books and go, wow, you must really like to read. Those two things are still true, but now the evidence only exists on a hard drive. My generation and those near to me preferred the material proof, the tangible, the touchable, the tactile. Throughout our homes were the shelves and cabinets full of books, records, tapes, CDs, DVDs. It all spoke to our dedication to thought and feelings. We were surrounded by the notes, the lyrics, the ideas, the stories, actual reminders that it was the content among these things that helped us to be the people we were. Those physical reminders pretty much gone. You can no longer walk into somebody's home where the walls are lined with books and music. I'm not even sure if that's better or worse. Feels worse. Feels different, to be sure. For me, my CDs were the last stand. I have about 1,100 of them. Perhaps that's part of the reason I held on to them for so long, especially after ridding my home of all the other things. I'd kept these CDs around. Symbolically. Yeah, I guess that's why I kept them around. Well, that and a bit of laziness. I've always been fascinated by the human evolution of recorded thought. It all began over 5,000 years ago when crude forms of written communication began to surface. Markings carved in stone on the walls of caves. Hey, Gork, have you read any good caves lately? Oh man, I'm halfway through this one in the Northeast. Can't wait to see how it turns out. Eventually, man would take quill and ink to papyrus. But even if all these thoughts and ideas were assembled into a book, it was just that, one book, kept in scholarly halls or early libraries, not really accessible to the masses. The wealthier authors could always hire a scribe to transcribe those books into a second copy, and that was it for hundreds of years. Scribe was a job, meaning, can you read and write? Yes. Well, good, that's a job. Read that book and write it out word for word. Hey, did you hear the Marquis has a bestseller on his hands with his latest book? Oh, really? How many copies? 2. Scribe. Write it out verbatim. Today we just repost. And it wasn't until the mid-1400s that Gutenberg rigged together a printing press. Suddenly, more books, recorded thought, more accessible to more people. But you know what was really an interesting time? About 1870 to the early 1900s. You know how we sometimes feel today? Overwhelmed. It's all going so fast. What is happening? I think that's how most people must have felt back then. In those 3 decades, we had the Second Industrial Revolution. Henry Ford was mass-producing affordable automobiles. Airplanes were suddenly flying in the sky. And we had the inventions of both recorded sound and radio, all in a short lifetime. Wow. Of course, Italian Marconi brought us the radio, and the American Edison stole the phonograph idea from the French. Think about it. What a paradigm shift. We no longer had to read it in the books and the newspapers. We didn't have to read it at all. We could just listen. Early radio was information and theater, but it was also music. With the phonograph, recorded music at our choosing. And except for the names and a few other changes you can talk about today, the story's the same one. First we had those cylinders, then we had 78s, 78 RPMs. Then just after World War II we had the 33, the album, and then 45s. Incidentally, my entire life, I've never known this, so I looked it up. 78s were limited in fidelity due to the wider grooves and fatter phonograph needles. 33s and 45s were vinyl with thinner grooves. There was improved phonograph technology. The 45s tended to sound better than the 33s because the faster speed allowed for less groove compression and greater dynamic range. But you could put a greater amount of material onto a 33 than you could a 45. Boy, talk about information that is totally useless in today's world. Hey kids, has Grandpa ever explained to you about the grooves and those speeds? Growing up, I remember seeing this t-shirt. It read, "Those born in 45 turned 33 in 78. Wow, mind blown. As I said, I grew up on vinyl. Got rid of it years ago. But it's funny, as I purge each format, the vinyl, the cassettes, the books, and now even the CDs, I go through the same set of feelings. I don't want to get rid of these. It took me a long time to collect these. I'll never get rid of them. They mean a lot to me. These are probably going to be worth a lot of money one day. Plus, each thing, the records, the tapes, the DVDs, the books, the CDs, it's a real thing. I can hold it in my hand. So yesterday it was precious. Today it's garbage? How could that be? It's like I have these 5 kids. And when the first one grew up and left home, it was very emotional. Then subsequently with each one, still difficult, but you've done it before. But then there's that last one. In this case, the CDs. Well, now after this, I'm an empty nester. As I said, the first to go was the vinyl. And it went out in an incredible way. I've told this story before, so if you've already heard it, well, here it is again. I started on records when I was about 11 or 12. Had my own record player in my own room. I bought 45s because, well, that's what you could afford. To this day, some of my favorite oldies are those that I had on 45 as a kid. And it's funny, even today, when I hear a song like, say, the Beatles, I Want to Hold Your Hand, in the background, I swear I can hear a muffled voice yelling, "Turn that down." By my teens, I had graduated to albums. First one I ever bought with my own money. Serialistic Pillow by Jefferson Airplane. Pretty cool, huh? Yeah, I'm pretty proud of that because it wasn't some bubblegummy pop group. This was full-on hardcore, psychedelic, groovy rock. Mind you, months later, I would trade a Yardbirds album for a Monkees record. But anyway, let's move on. By my 30s, I had amassed a good collection of about 1,500 discs. That is a ton of music. Well, actually, it's about half a ton. Yeah, it works out to be about 1,000 pounds of records and sleeves and assorted artwork. And through my teens and my 20s, I would move around a lot. Serialistic Pillow had a lot of different homes. All that heavy music. Every couple of years, it was boxed and taped and carried to the van. Sometimes the bottom would drop out. Beatles all over the driveway. I found out later that some of my friends actually punked out from helping me move because I had too many heavy albums. Eventually, I ended up in Ontario. This is relevant because Ontario had these plastic milk crates, exactly the width of an album, and they were sturdy. Us cool dudes actually stacked those milk crates near the stereo, and that was our record shelving. The books were on planks supported by cinder blocks. I love your place, it's so hip. So later on, I'm raising my kids, not really cranking the tunes as much as I used to, but I got all these albums. Cassettes are just starting to kind of happen. And I say to myself, enough. Enough with all this vinyl. I'm going to get rid of these. You know, some of these albums are probably worth a lot of money. I see a poster on a street corner. It says, "We buy used vinyl." Great, I called the number. Yeah, I got a lot of albums, a lot of special issues, probably worth a lot of money. What do you need from me, like titles and artists? No, we pay 10 cents a pound. What? These are my life. This is my music. It took me years to get these souvenirs. They are at the core of my being. Are you saying the core of my being is worth? That's right, 10 cents a pound. So that means my priceless collection has been whittled down to about $100. Screw that. You know, there's no Kijiji or Facebook Marketplace or eBay. So I just sit there insulted for about 6 months. Finally reconcile the differences within me and decide, they must go. I call about 100 of my favorites. I'll never part with these. The rest will go out to the curb for trash night. We lived in a neighborhood where you could take just about anything out to the curb, and they would pick it up. Trash bags, an old stove, your mother-in-law. Next morning, gone. What am I, Henny Youngman? Anyway, all those albums, one milk crate at a time, go out to the curb in front of the house. Safe inside the house remained Surrealistic Pillow, some Beatles, Van Morrison, Carole King, others. And that night I can't sleep, tossing and turning. I shouldn't have done it. I shouldn't have thrown them out. Those are very special. So what if they take up space? So what if they're difficult to move? You can't just throw them out. I sit up and I make a plan. I reset the alarm so that I can wake up way before the trash truck comes. And what I'll do is haul all those back into the garage and come up with a better plan than throwing them away. Yeah, that's what I'll do. So peacefully, I doze off. I was awakened at about 3 in the morning. The sound of a large truck idling outside our quiet suburban home. Also a lot of assorted commotion. I stagger to the living room and I see a lot of red lights flashing outside the house. Fire trucks, firefighters, even a cop car. I throw on some clothes and walk out. Hey, what's going on? Well, what had happened, said the fire chief. Somebody likely walking down the street flicked a cigarette butt onto your trash and everything caught on fire. If it hadn't been for my senior citizen neighbor who had to use the bathroom 4 times a night, no one would have noticed the fire and called 911. Then the fire would have spread to the large tree in the front yard and eventually to the roof of the house, and then, who knows? Hours later, in the light of day, the petroleum-based black pool of slime had hardened into some misshapen dark sculpture. In that mess was some of the finest music of the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, but the grooves were gone. There'd be no phonograph needle that could ever find any melody in that mess. Instead, a sharp spade broke it up into chunks, and that is how it all went to the landfill. And that's how I lost my vinyl. I kept saying, well, I guess it was meant to be. Postscript. Eventually we moved, and those precious 100 albums that I kept went into a cardboard box in the bottom shelf of the basement. The basement flooded. The remaining albums, including a very soggy Surrealistic Pillow, went to the curb, where they were eaten by locusts. Okay, not that last part, but fire and flood, the end of Larry's vinyl. Perhaps my parents were right all along. It was the devil's music. The other physical reminders don't really have a great story. My cassettes ended up in a Rubbermaid bin. Eventually I hauled it to one of those retro stores. About 400 mainstream albums on cassette. They gave me $30. I was happy to get it. Cassettes hold an interesting and unique place in the history of music formats. Cassettes were these mini containers of magnetic tape. Side note, I grew up on radio, so we used to have those big reel-to-reel tape machines. Some companies actually marketed reel-to-reels to the consumer, but it never caught on. You could have one, but nobody was making product for it, so it was limited use. They were still cool, though. I would still like one today. There's something neat about a sound system that also has a big reel-to-reel tape machine. Watching those big tape reels turning. Big wheel, keep on turning. Proud Mary, keep on burning. Philips took the magnetic tape concept, downsized it, and put it on a reusable cassette. These cassettes and the small cassette player recorders were really meant for, CEOs to record dictation or students to record lectures. We had a Lloyd's brand cassette player from Radio Shack. Oh my God, is that what my voice sounds like? Yeah. Eventually, they introduced higher-end cassette players to be part of a stereo component system. They had dual machines that could play on one, record on the other. Often we'd tape our vinyl records because we felt the cassette would last longer. The two big contributions of cassettes. Sony introduced the Walkman. That became so popular that they began to release full albums on cassette. But what it really gave us is music portability. Take your music with you everywhere. We still do that. Secondly, Cassettes gave birth to the mixtape. Translate that to your own playlist. Still a big feature on your Spotifys and Apples, etc. Often it feels like we went right from vinyl to CDs, but it was cassettes that contributed significantly to today's music habits. You know what else cassettes made possible? Bootleg tapes. Ooh, bootleg. We're enjoying music and breaking the law. The cassette begat the Walkman, which begat the iPod. And then there was Napster and LimeWire and legal streaming and so on. You know, actually, Napster and LimeWire were the digital versions of bootleg tapes. It was the cassette that also gave us terms like fast forward, rewind, and hey, hit pause. Expressions we still use today metaphorically. So the cassettes are gone, but I kept some books, maybe 20 or so for nostalgic reasons. The rest went to a library that someone runs in our building. I love those apartment building libraries, usually run by a volunteer tenant. Such a great idea. Ours used to be huge. People were just contributing anything in print that they no longer wanted in their living room. Finally, someone had to say, hey, I don't think we need the 12-volume hardcover technical manual from the Flange Factory, where Ed in number 307 worked for 40 years. We don't need 6 different complete Encyclopedia Britannicas. Now they just take novels and biographies, which I donated, and the rest of my stuff went to the Value Village thrift store. I have no idea who would ever have an interest in buying any of those. I suppose there's someone. A lot of people still have a lot of books. If you watch a lot of news, every Zoom expert guest they have is sitting somewhere in front of a huge wall of books. Look at me, look at my books, look at all I've read. I always think, wow, they sure went to a lot of time and effort and money to show us how smart they are, only to open their mouth and in a few seconds prove otherwise. My DVDs just went onto a table in the building's laundry room with a note that said, "Free to a good home." I remember wondering how many extra Porsches did Jerry Seinfeld buy based on the number of Seinfeld box sets he was able to sell. Box sets that are now in a trash bin or free on a table in a laundry room. Notice I haven't mentioned the VHS tapes. Yeah, what few I had went into the trash. Never really had that many because, we had Blockbuster. I never had a video camera, so I didn't have a lot of family stuff or personal stuff on VHS. And those blank tapes I bought where I recorded programs, garbage. Certainly never developed an emotional connection to the VHS tapes that I had with those other formats. Now that last child is leaving home. The CDs. A retro store is going to buy some of them. Some of these are probably worth a lot of money. I'll probably end up with around $200. I figure by rough estimate that in my lifetime, on my vinyl, cassettes, CDs, DVDs, and books, I've spent approximately $45,000. If I had sold those records by the pound, instead of losing them in a fire, it'd be about $100, plus $30 for the cassettes, $200 for the CDs. My original investment of $45,000 is now valued at approximately $330. If I had just taken that $45K and put it in a bank or a basic lift, I'd be ahead, at least financially. And no, you can't look at it that way, because I'd be far behind culturally, emotionally, academically. Oh, and as far as physical evidence, I still have a few bins full of pictures, printed photographs. I've digitized some of them, but it's a painstaking process. The actual photos sit in a closet. Gone are the records, the cassettes, the books, now the CDs. I feel their absence. I guess I could go to the library or to that retro store and visit them. It'll be like going to a museum.
Later That Same Life is written, voiced, and produced by Larry Fedoruk. LarryFedoruk37@gmail.com. Subscribe to Larry's podcast YouTube channel. Get automatic notifications with each new episode.